Hi, Dr. Lasky. My name is Rachel Lamb, and today I will be talking to you about the plant species Carduus nutans. And for a bit of a an outline about what I'll be covering, I'll be talking about background information, growth form and life history, allocation to effort to reproductive events, sexual and gender system, pollination mechanism, seed dispersal mechanism, and phenology of flowering and fruiting. So, Carduus nutans is also known as musk thistle. It is in the family Asteraceae and is an angiosperm. And it also lives in quite a few different places. So, it is native to Europe, Asia, North Africa, and western Siberia. And it is also invasive to the US, all provinces of Canada except for Prince Edward Island, Argentina, Australia, and New Zealand. And because it is found in so many different places, it has a very wide habitat range. It can live from sea level to 2,438 meters in elevation. It can live in saline to acidic soils. It can also produce seeds in places that receive 25 centimeters of annual rainfall. And it tends to grow along fence lines, brush patches, and open fields, as you can see in this picture. So, as for the growth form and life history, it is a herbaceous biennial or occasionally winter annual or just an annual, and its growth stage happens as a seedling and then tends to turn into a rosette in the spring. It will overwinter and then enter a bolting phase in the next upcoming spring, and then it will flower and seed in the end of the growing season, usually around late spring and fall. And as for how it allocates effort to reproductive events, it is a short-lived semelparous plant. So once it flowers, it will senesce, and then the seeds will fall out. And as far as the sexual and gender system goes, it is primarily an outcrossing species. It has higher selfing rates in northern populations, and a study done in Kansas looked at two different populations of Carduus nutans, and they estimated the outcrossing rate between these two populations almost equal to 1, which is very high. And also, they looked at semi-isolated plants in the same study and found that the outcrossing rate was highly variable and averaged less than 50% outcrossing rate. As for the um, the gender system, it is a hermaphroditic flower, and they are also protoandrous. And interactions with that flower trait include the structure of the flower itself. So the anthers sit slightly above the stigmas in a mature flower head, and because of this, the flower structure itself does not prevent selfing. And also, this plant does not use vegetative reproduction, or there has not been any reported vegetative reproduction to occur. As for pollination mechanisms go, they use unspecific plant pollinators, and some of these pollinators include Bombus, Lepidoptera, Apis, wasp, arthropods, uh, halictids, and megachilids. And some interesting things to note about some of the pollinators is that bombus tend to forage more randomly in dense populations, and this was seen in a plant called prairie blazing star, which grows in Kansas and also tends to pollinate Carduus nutans in a similar manner. Bombus individuals visit fewer florets per flower head and more heads per unit of time at higher densities. And this is good for Carduus nutans because they have many florets on a single flower head. And Lepidoptera also have a significantly higher flying distance than bees at higher densities. And also because Carduus nutans uses many different pollinators, the pollination distribution is based heavily on the movements of the different pollinators themselves. And in my opinion, this probably has to do with the density of the musk thistle populations. So higher density populations will probably have higher movement of pollen than lower density ones. And as for how this pollination mechanism interacts with other plant traits is that Carduus nutans actually has 4 different flower morphs. So And the pictures below, you can see the 4 different morphs. There are purple corollas with purple pollen, pink corollas with white pollen, white corollas with purple pollen, and white corollas with white pollen. And so one of the studies noted that pollinators tend to visit the pink morphs more, and the pink morphs had a higher female fitness. And so I think that's an interesting thing to note, in my opinion, because there are 4 different morphs and different colored pollens. Maybe this could attract more specific pollinators in a certain way. And so for seed dispersal mechanism, seeds for Carduus nutans can be dispersed in 2 different ways. They can use wind dispersal and animal dispersal. So the dry fruits on Carduus nutans are dispersed by wind, and they tend to fall near the parent plant within 50 meters, and less than 1% of these seeds can make it further than 100 meters. And as for animal dispersal goes, the seeds itself are actually adapted for ant dispersal, and they have little food bodies called elysosomes, and this allows the seeds to be removed by the ants. And this dispersal mechanism itself is highly environmentally context dependent, and also how the ants move the seeds affects the predation rates of the seeds themselves. And rodents and birds also can remove these seeds from dense populations and away from the mother plant, and this itself allows the seeds to be redistributed. Unfortunately, a lot of these seeds that are dispersed by rodents and birds are lost to seed predation. As for phenology of flowering goes, individuals that germinate in the spring have a possibility to flower later in the year and behave as annuals, but rosettes that have 36 centimeters in diameter by the end of the growing season have a very high probability of flowering the next growing season regardless of germination time. And some environmental variation that happens with phenology is that it is dependent on the location. So in Midwestern US, it occurs late May to early June, and in Canada, this occurs from June to July. Phenology in regards to fruiting, seed maturation and dispersal tends to occur 1 to 3 weeks after flowering, and some environmental variation that happens with phenology of fruiting is that in Nebraska, or I guess you could generalize to the Midwestern US, the first head to bloom produce on average 1,000 good quality seeds per head, and then the last heads to bloom produce 26 good quality seeds per head. And in Ontario, the mean values of seed heads are approximately 165 to 230 or 256 seeds per head. And some interacting traits that occur with flowering and fruiting is that flower heads that bloom earlier in the year tend to produce more seeds, and then flower heads that bloom later in the year tend to produce less seeds. And in my opinion, this would probably be due to the amount of time that is available for pollination, or when pollinators are most dense, depending on what time of year it is. And these are my sources that I used for this video, and also these are the images I used in the video. Now, Dr. Lasky, thank you for a great semester, and I hope you have a wonderful winter break.